Russia just seized $3 billion worth of Arctic vessels, and almost nobody noticed. This wasn't a headline that broke cable news, nor was it a dramatic naval battle televised globally. No, it was a $3 billion power play, an economic strategic strike, delivered quietly in the world's coldest sea. And make no mistake, this is about far more than vessels frozen in polar darkness. This marks a moment when control of global commerce, energy flows, and strategic leverage shifted, maybe permanently, toward Moscow. Because those ships weren't random. They were the engines of a new maritime world, and whoever controls them controls one of the most important corridors on Earth. But before we get there, let me ask you a question that most people aren't even asking yet. What if the most consequential power shift of the 21st century is unfolding not in the streets of global capitals, but on melting ice at the top of the world? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why this isn't just Arctic news. It's a silent revolution in global influence, resources, and a shortcut to power. For centuries, the Arctic was unreachable, a frozen wilderness no one could reliably navigate. Ice-blocked ships, temperatures froze fuel lines, trade routes circled far to the south. That's changed. Welcome to the era of rapid Arctic transformation. Ice is melting at a pace unseen in modern history, creating new marine corridors that open summers longer and winters shorter. These aren't just climate statistics. They are real openings in the planet's final frontier. This transformation gave birth to something with the potential to reshape global trade, the Northern Sea Route, NSR, running along Russia's entire Arctic coast, from the Barents Sea all the way to the Bering Strait. The NSR isn't just another shipping lane, it's a shortcut between Europe and Asia, reducing transit distances by up to 40% versus the Suez Canal, a route that for decades has been the backbone of global shipping. Shorter distances mean less fuel burned, faster delivery, lower transit costs, greater economic efficiency. That's not trivial. That's game-changing. And Russia doesn't just see the NSR as a route, it sees it as its strategic lifeline. Now, why Russia wants the Arctic so badly? Russia's Arctic strategy isn't accidental. It's intentional, methodical, and now baked into national policy. For years, Moscow has invested billions in Arctic infrastructure, nuclear icebreakers, ports, satellite, and meteorological systems, logistic hubs, military installations. This is not just a shipping venture. It's part of a broader economic and geopolitical blueprint to pivot Russia toward Arctic dominance. Here's what the Arctic means for Russia. 1. Resource wealth. The Arctic holds enormous untapped deposits, roughly 30% of global natural gas and 13% of oil reserves, much of it within Russian territorial waters. 2. Export leverage. Most of Russia's oil and gas exports now transit along this corridor, representing a vital economic artery. 3. Economic growth. Cargo traffic along the Northern Sea Route has surged from tiny amounts a decade ago to tens of millions of tons yearly, with projections far higher by 2035. But crucially, and this is where the $3 billion seizure becomes meaningful, Russia wants not only to use this corridor, but to control it, regulating who traverses it, how they traverse it, and under whose authority they do so. Control means power, control means leverage, and control of global commerce means influence. The shadowfleet and sanctions evasion. After the invasion of Ukraine, Western nations hit Moscow with severe sanctions, targeting energy exports, shipping, insurance, port access. The goal was straightforward: cripple Russia's income and choke off its ability to export energy. But Russia didn't fold. It adapted. Out of necessity and strategic cunning, Moscow built what analysts now call the shadow fleet. This is not a correctional nickname. It's a network thought to include hundreds, and possibly over 1,000 vessels that sail under flags of convenience, switch identities, sail without reliable insurance, and often evade Western tracking. Many of these vessels operate along the Northern Sea Route, helping Moscow export oil and liquefied natural gas despite sanctions and scrutiny. This fleet is Moscow's economic lifeline, a sanctions-proof workaround, and the ships recently seized weren't random. They were part of this network that keeps Russian energy flowing. This means one thing: Russia's Arctic seizure wasn't theft. It was securing its escape route from Western pressure, and that strikes at the heart of global economic stability. Imagine if someone controlled a major global highway, the law that defines how it's used, and a shadow fleet immune to penalties. That's not free trade. That's power politics in overdrive. Now let's pull back and look at the global ripple effects. Global shipping, chokes, and economic shocks. Throughout history, choke points have defined trade. The Suez Canal, for example, is one of the world's most important maritime bottlenecks, an essential artery for oil, goods, and trade flows. When it's blocked, the world feels it. Now, the Arctic is emerging as a second economic choke point, not by accident, but by design and necessity. Let's look at how this plays out. The Red Sea crisis, a preview of global risk. When the Red Sea and Suez Canal were disrupted recently, global freight costs shot upward, fuel prices spiked, and delays rippled through supply chains. That's a real economic shock that affects ordinary consumers. Higher prices, slower deliveries, marketplace volatility. Now imagine a scenario where both Suez and the Arctic corridor are unstable or politically contested. That's not supply chain noise. That's a global economic earthquake. Great powers, rivalries, and military preparation. Control of the Arctic isn't just about economics. It's about geopolitics and security. Russia has poured resources into reopening military bases, rebuilding airfields abandoned after the Soviet collapse, expanding coastal defenses, enhancing surveillance and naval capacity. Moscow is transforming the Arctic from a remote frontier into a strategic theater of influence and defense. That's no accident. Western powers are noticing. NATO has expanded its northern presence. Finland and Sweden have joined NATO precisely because of shared concerns about Russian dominance in the high north. And it's not just NATO worried. Asian powers are moving too. China's Arctic advances. China, despite not having Arctic coastline, calls itself a near-Arctic state. Beijing is expanding cooperation with Russia in the Arctic through infrastructure investment, research, and logistics support. Why? Because the Arctic, and especially the Northern Sea Route, offers a trade route that sidesteps traditional Western-dominated waters. For nations like China, India, and South Korea, the Arctic represents new routes, access to energy supplies, shared infrastructure opportunities. One South Korean analysis even shows that using the route from Busan to Europe could cut transit time drastically, reshaping logistics planning in East Asia. This emerging economic reality is forcing Western nations to reconsider their strategic posture. The Arctic is no longer peripheral. It's central to global logistics, energy security, and military strategy, all at the same time. Environmental and safety risks. But let's be clear, all this strategic competition is happening in one of the most fragile ecosystems on Earth. The rate of ice melt is accelerating commercial access, but at the cost of accelerating ecological damage. In 2024 alone, more than 84% of cargo on the Northern Sea Route was oil and gas, raising the risk of catastrophic spills in waters where cleanup is nearly impossible. Combine that with older, poorly insured ships from the shadowfleet, and the Arctic could become an environmental disaster zone. A single accident could have consequences for marine ecosystems, indigenous communities, global climate feedback loops. That's not distant future talk, that's now. International law, navigation rights, and power politics. The seizure of vessels also raises questions about maritime law and sovereignty. Western nations argue that maritime space should remain open, governed by international treaties like the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. But when a major power starts seizing assets and redefining routes, those norms are put to the test. And it isn't just Russia doing this. China's growing Arctic engagement and Russia's assertions over the Northern Sea Route are forcing countries to rethink legal frameworks for navigation, sovereignty, and enforcement. In many ways, this is not just economic competition, it's a battle over the rules that govern the world. The final cliffhanger. What comes next? Let's be absolutely clear. This is not over. Russia's seizure is a statement, not a tweak, not a protest. A statement. It tells the world that trade routes can be controlled, sanctions can be circumvented, maritime law can be weaponized, influence can shift without a single shot fired. And that sets the stage for something far bigger. Because when trade routes become political tools, every country with skin in the game will stand up, take notice, and prepare to either compete or counter. The Arctic is now a strategic arena where supply chains, energy dominance, security alliances, economic power are all being actively reshaped, and the rules of the game are still being written. Now, why this matters to you? This matters because global economics today is global geopolitics tomorrow. Rising shipping costs hit your grocery bill. Interrupted energy flows raise utility prices. Power shifts influence financial markets. Strategic alliances decide national security. And all of it is being shaped right now, high above the Arctic Circle. So if you want to understand the future of energy, trade, and global power, start here, because the currents of influence are shifting, and they're flowing straight through the melting ice of the Arctic. If this video opened your eyes to forces reshaping our world, hit like, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives, because in this new age, those who understand the tides steer the future.